Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 320, brought to us by our presenting sponsor, Osseo Gear. Don, when I say Chasing Giants, a tradition like no other, do you know what that means?
Well, the Masters.
Hey, you got it. You're not even a golf fan, are you?
No, but I heard that on TV years ago.
It is Masters weekend. I've always wanted to get Don Higgins on a golf course, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
I've been on a golf course. My dad's a golfer, and he golfs pretty regular, actually.
Does he?
Yeah, in the summer when the weather's nice, he goes a couple times a week, and keeps him in good shape, I guess.
Well, next time I'm up there in the summertime, I'll have to go golfing with your dad then.
He'd do it.
You realize most people do wear shorts while they're playing golf. So do you have the blue jeans on when you go out on a golf course there, Dono?
Well, I haven't been with him in probably over 20 years. It's been a long, long time ago when I went with him, but I'm going to guess I had jeans on, yes.
I'm guessing at Augusta National, where they're playing this week, they would not let you wear jeans, but that's beside the point. It's kind of odd. You're in your office at home. I'm in my office in Kentucky, and it feels like we just saw each other about 4 hours ago. I made a run to Illinois for some meetings and brought back. I had a Duramax 3500 squatted down with a whole pallet of seed mineral, bringing it back in here to get ready for this year. So I think you made a stop into the office today, and we had to take care of some stuff. And then you went and saw our friend Jay Gingrich, right?
Yeah, I did. Second time this week, actually. I picked up a load of trees earlier in the week, and Robin and I planted about 75 trees yesterday. 25 persimmon, 25 chestnut, and about 25 red cedars. So needed a few more red cedars to finish out the project I was working on, so I stopped in today and got those.
Gotcha. Loretta, his lovely wife, stopped by the office to get some miscanthus rhizomes today, but I was in a meeting, so I didn't get a chance to see her. But always appreciate getting to spend time with Jay and Loretta at Gingrich Tree Farms. Here's just, I don't know if people actually believe us when we say stuff like this, but the tree inventory, they're selling so many. Jay said the number of trees he's shipping out, he's put it on social media. If you want trees, whether it's this spring or next fall, you need to get a hold of Jay so that he can plan accordingly. Trees are not like some products we buy in the hunting industry that just show up out of a warehouse. You know, he's got these things in either, having to store them or potted trees, and he has to plan production like we do miscanthus rhizomes based on what people want. The better off you are, or the better off you'll be, is if you call and talk to Jay and get lined up for what you want for your tree delivery, right?
Yeah, he was loading up a trailer to head to Ohio today, making a big delivery out of JB's feed. I think there's 60-some people coming to pick up trees
Wow.
Saturday there at JB's. So he was loading up and headed east.
Yep. And I know when I was walking out of the back of the office just 4.5 hours ago, one of our real world dealers from Missouri was loading up rhizomes and a pallet of different seed blends that he was taking back to his real world store, and he was heading to Gingrich to pick up his load of trees. So a lot of our real world dealers have actually started carrying either Mike's Mighty Micros or Gingrich Tree Farms. A lot of them started carrying Novix or Hawk. So we've tried to make this kind of community of our dealers having access to all these other fantastic products that we've tried to work with over the years.
Yeah, and one thing feeds another. So you can see by the T-shirts and hats that Terry and I have on today, it's a wide variety of companies, but great partners, and glad to have them on board.
Yeah, so this episode's going to be, we've kind of teed this up for a little bit. We're going to talk about the close of consulting season this year, and you and I are going to talk about some of our picks of some properties without giving away too many details of our clients and where they're at. We're going to talk about some specifics about some awesome properties and also what makes them really, really nice after the Osseo break. But, you know, you were planting trees. I was picking up seed. As we prepare for planting season, I got to just throw this out there and let you run with it. It seems like, I don't know if it's things like the Masters tournament or that first warm spell or what happens, but a lot of landowners or habitat managers get that itch, right? They want to go, and maybe they're watching the calendar. Dwayne Hopkins, our head seedsman, has this saying, you watch the conditions, not the calendar. And he made a post on, I believe, Green Prairie's Facebook page this week, and it had a thermometer in the ground showing ground temperatures of like 40 degrees. Talk a little bit about how, you know, we try to maintain this pent-up demand to go and get ready for this year. We want to get it in as early as we can, but we got to also have the right conditions so that we have the best results.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic that you bring that up because I was just in the last couple of days corresponding with someone in Iowa who had planted our real world beans and had an issue with the deer not eating them. Well, I actually, we've been selling these beans for 18 years and we tested them a couple of years before we started selling them. So I've got about 20 years experience with these soybeans. And this is the first year that I've ever had the deer not basically devour every bean that I had. And I still probably got over 50% of the beans that were in my plot are still there. And the reason for it was not the soybean itself, the variety, but it was the weather conditions. And what happened here in the Midwest, especially right here where I'm at, and I'm sure it varied some from region to region, but we had a lot of rain early. And those soybeans got off to a fantastic start, grew great big plants. And then mid-July, about the time those plants were starting to put blooms on, the rain stopped. And from mid-July until early November, we got almost no rain at all. There's a couple times we got a tenth or two, but not even enough to settle the dust. Well, what happened with those soybeans is that they started to put those pods on and then it got bone dry and there was not the moisture to finish that life cycle of that soybean plant. And the soybeans inside those pods are really, really tiny and they're not even fully developed. Just yesterday, I was out looking at them in my plot and I busted open a couple pods. And the soybean is not like round like it would typically be. It's more flat. Inside that pod, it's almost kind of moldy. I mean, it's no wonder the deer ate them at all, the way they looked. And like I said, it's the first time in 20 years that I've seen that. But ironically, back in 2012, when we had the really bad drought, just the opposite happened. So the drought of 2012 actually started in the fall of 2011. And it carried on into the spring and summer of 2012. And I remember this because I flew to Alaska for a moose hunt the 1st of September. And I was gone for 16 days. And 16 days later, I came back. And when I left, we was in the worst drought of my entire life. Everything was toast brown. I hadn't mowed my yard in 2 months. My soybean plants were not even knee high, and they were just sitting there at the same height they'd been for 6 or 8 weeks. Well, then right as we left for that Alaska hunt, a hurricane pushed up a bunch of moisture. I mean, several inches of moisture. Well, I came home while I was gone. My wife had mowed the yard 3 times. We had not mowed in 2 months, and she mowed 3 times in 16 days. Now, of course, if the grass gets a half-inch growth on it, she's out there mowing it. But the crazy thing is that I went down to my soybean plot, and in 16 days of me being gone, and I probably didn't look at them right before I left, so it may be more like 20 days or so, 3 weeks that I hadn't seen those beans. Those plants had almost tripled in height, and they were absolutely loaded with beans and had a fantastic, even though it was a drought year, the worst drought of my entire life, that rain came at the right time, and we got a fantastic soybean crop that year. That was a year when the guys were mowing down corn because it was only producing like 14 or 17 bushels an acre, and they were just taking the batwing mowers out and just mowing it down, wasn't even running a combine through it. But yet, the soybean really requires that late moisture. If you get into August and September, that's when the grain is put on that plant. That's when the pods fill out. And it'll really affect the size of the individual grain, bean grain. But we can do everything right. We can use the best seed. We can use the best planting methods. We can have fantastic weed control. We can do our soil tests and get our fertility right, do everything perfect. But Mother Nature can throw a wrench in that and just totally screw it up. And that's what happened this year with the soybeans. And the crazy thing is I've been expecting to hear more, I don't know if you call it complaints or concerns from our customers, and I didn't hear much. And this guy from Iowa was the first one that I heard. And I wasn't a bit surprised to hear what he said, but he actually shared a video of deer hammering a ag soybean plot, and right next to it was a real world plot that they weren't touching. And he wanted an explanation on that. And it was simple. It was just at different maturities. So those ag beans where he was at in Iowa, I'm sure the farmer that planted those, it was probably around a group 2, which is an earlier maturing bean. So that bean plant was putting on the grain before we really got into that dry spell. And so I have no doubt whatsoever that was the issue. And, like I told him, we've been selling these soybeans, these Gen 2 soybeans for 18 years now. If there was and sales have increased every single year for 18 years, sales have beat the previous year. That would not happen if there was a problem with the soybeans. But these, weather conditions are just totally out of our hand, as they are any farmer. And it just so happened that in various regions, there's pockets like here in central Illinois where we were under extreme drought throughout the entire winter. I mean, clear up into January and February. And now we've started getting some rain, and that's backed off some. But I just seen a recent drought monitor map, and my county is still in a drought, even with all the rain we've had. So again, we can do everything right, but Mother Nature can ruin all our efforts.
Well, and I think the other aspect of this is, it's pocket specific based on exact weather conditions, because we're 4 hours apart, but you don't have to go 4 hours to find a different scenario, right? So, even where I hunt in Illinois and where your farm is at in Illinois is an hour apart. And we often talk about how different the crop situation is, especially last year with the replant of corn. There was so much difference in where you were at and maybe just a little bit north around Champaign to where you're at to even down, around the Effingham area. So you don't even have to go from Illinois to Kentucky to see those differences. But I really, really appreciate the conversation, because corn, it has the same requirement for that rain, but it's right around the tassel. It needs that shot of water at the right time to get the yield. And I was talking with Dwayne Hopkins this week about the yield that I got in food plot corn was just stupid. But it's not about how good of a farmer or food plotter I am. I had those shots of rain just I won the lottery with the luck of the draw of when I got the right rain at the right time to make those plants explode.
Yeah, I had a fantastic corn crop. My soybeans were terrible, but my corn was fantastic because it got the early rain. And actually, a corn will determine its yield very early in the growth cycle. I think it's at the V2 or V3 stage.
Mm-hmm.
When it's putting on those first sets of leaves, the corn is going to largely determine its yield then. And it's very similar, if you think about it, it's very similar to fetal programming, where that plant is being told by the weather conditions that, hey, you're going to be able to put on a giant ear because you've got the moisture, you've got the fertility, and that corn plant responds. With soybeans, it's totally different. That the plant, will grow early, but it's that late growth stage, right as it's setting them pods and filling out those pods. When it's setting the pods, great conditions can mean you either have 3 beans in a pod or 4 beans in a pod. And then once that pod is set, then how big that bean becomes within the pod is determined by the weather you're going to get. Yeah, I'm not a farmer by any means, but the more food plots I plant, the more I learn and listen to people smarter than myself. It's just, if we can do everything right, but Mother Nature can throw us a curveball and we're out of luck.
Well, I know the listeners that we have right now that are farmers, just think about when they have thousands, hundreds of acres of row crop and they're looking at their bean production. There's a big difference in that farmer getting timely rains to have 2 or 3 beans in a pod versus every pod having 4 beans that are larger. You talk about a difference in yield. That could make a horrendous, devastating year or a phenomenal year with their row crop. I mean, it's Mother Nature dictates everything in this.
And different varieties. There's probably not a farmer out there, at least a big farmer, that's planting like all his corn the same variety of corn or all his beans the same variety of beans. They're hedging their bets. And some of that they change varieties based on the soil type. But some of that is just maturities. They're trying to hit that perfect window for pollination on the corn and for the beans. And that's what happened in this Iowa situation I'm describing with the soybeans is I'm sure I would lay money on it that the ag beans that were being compared to the real world beans were a shorter season bean, and they were farther into that production cycle or production part of the life cycle when those drought conditions hit in that area.
Well, it just further goes along with the theme of diversity. Just like that farmer's planting multiple, GMO varieties of his row crop, we are planting multiple varieties of plants every year. So if we do have something that Mother Nature doesn't agree with and kind of fumbles on, we have a great corn year, or we have a great fall plot year, or our clover is lush. There's things that we can do to basically hedge our bet as food plotters to make sure we still have food for the deer.
Yep. Diversity's key. And, that's where the fruit trees come in too. A lot of times those fruit trees will either have a bumper crop or maybe a late frost totally wipes the crop out of some varieties. Talking about Jay's apple trees, those were selected for late blooms and late drop, so that those later blooms will miss a lot of those late frosts. And then the late drop puts that apple crop into hunting season instead of like back in August or early September.
Right. All right. Diversity, lack of intrusion. The themes keep staying the same. 320 episodes in, folks.
Just keep stacking those things. Less human intrusion and more diversity.
There we go. Well, we'll be right back after a message from Osseo to talk about wrapping up consulting season and some of our most favorite properties we saw. We'll be right back.
Osseo Gear has perfected one of the most innovative camo patterns on the market. The unique camo pattern designed to mimic the feather patterns of one of North America's greatest predators, the great horned owl. Combined with intuitive features, superior comfort, and ultra high quality fabrics give bow hunters the ultimate advantage. Osseo has outfitted over 10,000 bow hunters across the country with over 1,000 5-star reviews. Visit asiogear.com to check it out for yourself. Use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off.
Okay, Don, this segment's brought to us by our friends at Hawk Optics to talk about consulting season. But before I kick this off, the most common question that you and I are getting at this point, non-podcast related, is about our master classes. So while I'm not spilling the beans on this just yet, we have and working on an idea that's going to be unlike anything that's ever been done by us or anybody in the hunting community. And we are reaching out over the next couple of weeks to try to, we can identify. Our goal is to potentially roll off some of these events this coming winter. So stay tuned to the podcast, stay tuned to social media. I appreciate the interest in this. We're trying to do what we can to accommodate a lot of different factors with this program. But we got some creative ideas on how we can spin this thing, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, something that, to my knowledge, nobody has done before. A new spin on the whole master class, if you will.
Yep. Stay tuned to that. We will send more information out as soon as we are able to talk about it, but stay tuned on it. So let's wrap up consulting season with some highs. I don't know that I had any lows. I had a phenomenal year meeting a bunch of new friends and great people, but I'll let you kind of go first with your summary and we can talk about some specific properties.
Yeah, I looked at properties from the farthest east I went would have been Maryland. And the farthest west I would have been central Kansas. I didn't go any further south than Kentucky, and as far north into northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin. And I always like to pick out my favorite property for the year. And this year, there's two that just stood out. I mean, these are the kind of properties that if they came for sale in my area, I'd be doing what I could to nab onto them. And the thing that they had in common, neither one was very big. One was like 40 acres and the other one was like 62 or something like that. One was in Illinois, one was in Ohio. But the real key to both of those is they both set right against giant no hunting sanctuaries, and both had opportunities to provide a lot of food. And so the sanctuaries in both cases were basically all wooded or cover. No food really in that sanctuary, either sanctuary, except for browse. But these properties butted right up there and had a lot of open acres that could be put into food. And I've got no doubt that both of these clients are going to shoot numerous big mature deer in the coming years. Both clients are pretty young guys, so they got a lot of years ahead of them. And those two plans that I put together, they're different because the properties lay out a little bit different. Also in Ohio, you can supplemental feed, so we took advantage of that. But these guys are definitely going to, if they just follow the plan, I hope they're listening and I hope they buy into it, because they've got really, really special properties and they will kill some mature bucks.
All right. Well, last year, my consulting season took me from central Iowa to basically the shore of the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. So I did a lot more properties last year. I cut way back this year just due to time. We were developing and releasing Scrape Magnet, had a lot of responsibilities at work. So I did probably 10 fewer properties this year and kind of handpicked some that were really, really close to me. So I didn't travel as far. But I would be remiss if I didn't say one of my favorite projects is this elk job, because it's so unique. How can you not like a project that has, it's reclaimed strip mines in Kentucky, close to one of the original release sites of where they reintroduced elk into the state of Kentucky. We saw 14 elk on the ride and the side-by-side on the property. And what was so cool about it is you go up these switchbacks in the mountains, like almost vertical, to try to get up on top of it. And then you get up on top of it and there's huge acreages of open fields, where they just took the tops of these mountains off. So you're in the middle of the mountains, but you feel like you're out in the plains. Just a lot of underbrush, a lot of grasses. So I really like that project because it has great access. It's a lot of acres. The diversity there, they got black bear, turkey. They have unbelievable whitetail on it. There's been whitetail shot there in the mid 170s, which is amazing considering the lack of nutrition that's there. And then obviously the elk. So I really like the challenge of working with our team to find the right nutrition package that appeals and attracts and helps the whitetail side, but is the right nutrition and mixes for the elk. Obviously elk have a much different dietary restriction or need than whitetail. So I can't not say that wasn't in my top two just because of the experience of getting to work with elk in my home state. Probably a once in a lifetime opportunity to do that. It's a bigger tract, but the diversity of the land, just really, really cool. So huge shout out to Dr. Shipley, huge shout out to Dwayne Hopkins. We've tag teamed this and came from, a real physiological standpoint with the elk, and then tried to build it also for whitetail as well. So that's obviously on top of my list. The second one is also goes to the Buckeye state of Ohio. as my top whitetail property. And this client has had me do, I believe now, 6 properties for him. And he acquired a new tract. And normally I don't do this many large acreage tracts, but I think I did 6 or 7 over 500 acres this year, which is, in my rural area, that's really odd to have that many acres on one tract of ground. But he had just acquired this place. I knew the previous landowner, and the previous landowner had also managed it for whitetail. So what I really liked about that project is there wasn't anything that I really thought. You and I go to some properties and it's like we put an X through maybe some ideas that are there that are either putting too much intrusion or don't have access. There really wasn't any of those showstoppers that were on the property, but starting with good tillable ground, most of the time you and I are trying to find as much ground as we can to plant. That was already there. Now it was putting in just an unbelievable hunting strategy to where they had a balance of field edges with awesome accesses and, good funneling of deer coming out of the cover to also giving them some rut funnel type scenarios. This property is on 2 sides of the road with both sides of those tracks having 2 sides of access. So you had kind of a county road in the center of the property, and then you had another county road on each side. So you had not only a road in the center, but you could access both sides of the road from 360 degrees. And the access, we don't have that many tracks like you do up in open ag country where you're in a section and you might be able to come across open road. Usually we're dealing with one road frontage and hope that it's in a good area to give you access to the farm. What I liked about that is already a spot to put food. So we focused a lot on our diversity, our food program, and a ton of access in different directions for a lot of different winds. It's kind of a common theme of what we see when we have access and we have, not a lot of intrusion around it. That's really what makes the property.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how many properties I did. It doesn't matter, but the smallest properties that I'd done, I did 2 or 3 that were 10 acres.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one I did was 1,400 and some acres. I did, I don't know, 2 others that were over 1,000. But the thing that I've noticed over time is that it seems like the clients are becoming way more knowledgeable and their properties already, for the most part. Some of them are like brand new properties that were just bought or whatever. But for the most part, the client is way more knowledgeable. A lot of them have listened to Chasing Giants for years, so they've already implemented some of our strategy. And I think some of them know what to look for. A lot of them know what to look for in a property now. There doesn't seem to be near as many duds as there used to be, because there was a long list. If I went back through my list for the year, I could just make check after check after check of fantastic properties. But those 2 that when you've got hundreds of acres of no hunting sanctuary right against you and there's no food on it whatsoever, I mean, that's just a recipe for killing big deer.
Absolutely. And it's funny, you mentioned how much more kind of educated our clients are, our listeners are. How many times have you been on a tour of a property and one of our clients will say, well, we have a stand up there, but I know you're not going to want to hunt it because we're putting they've already admitted it in their mind that they know that we're going to say no to that one that's just putting way too much pressure on the core. So I think people are, like you said, getting a little bit more accustomed with our philosophy here.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. And there was one property I did not too long ago where we came across the stand, and it was in the middle of all the what should have been the sanctuary. And as I often do when I see a stand like that, I don't say, that stand needs moved or that stand sucks. I usually say, how do you get to that stand and what wind direction do you use? And that's all you got to do is ask them those 2 questions. And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I know it sucks. I shouldn't be there.
Sentimental stands. We still run into sentimental stands sometimes.
Yep, we do.
All right, well let's shift gears and go to the 360 Blinds Higgins hot seat question. And this is going to circle back to soil health, Don. And I didn't prep you on any of this. We haven't even talked about this over the last couple weeks, but over the last couple years, you've made a big point and used some key phrases like farming for nutrients or regenerative farming or soil health. We are continuing to push the envelope in what types of plants can provide the most nutrition and health benefits for the whitetail. We have projects that we have test sites out this year on, new things that we're trying to revolutionize the industry with. But just from a soil health standpoint, go back from last year, what you did with some things that you did different on your farm, and what is that transition in? What do you have to do this year before planting season, if anything, for soil health related items?
Well, for the most part, I don't have to do a whole lot because it's already been done. And in terms of, working biochar into the soil, applying humic. But, I need to make a video because I've got 2 new clover patches that are really fruit orchards, with clover in the fruit orchard. And one of those was a food plot for many years. And it got treated with the biochar, it got treated with the humic. And that clover looks like a lush carpet. You cannot see a bare dirt anywhere. It's just a sea of clover that's bright green. It's all the same height. Just looks fantastic. Well, I got another one that is on some of this newer ground that I bought. It was previously part of an ag field, kind of in the corner of an ag field. And basically I just went in and I drilled with the pH drill. It drilled in clover, and then I planted my fruit trees. And yeah, I used a lot of seed. I even overseeded with the broadcast seeder and everything. But you can just tell day and night difference of the clover in those 2 plots. And the only difference is how they had been farmed before. The food plot that I'd had on the farm for years had the humic in, it had the biochar, and I'd done crop rotations, I'd done soil building seed mixes, and you can absolutely see the difference with that. I need to get out there and make a video of that just to prove a point. But I do have one new plot. I've kind of rearranged something here close to the house, basically to accommodate more fruit trees. Those fruit tree plantings, I'm telling you what, they just draw the deer. I counted the other day, I think I got 7 of those orchards or mini orchards. I think the smallest one has 6 trees, and the biggest one has about 40 trees. Most of them have like 20 to 30 trees in it. Apples, pears, chestnuts, persimmons. That diversity is just absolutely huge. If you have crop failure on something, maybe your pears don't produce this year, but the apples do, or maybe some varieties of apples do, but others don't for whatever reason. That diversity is absolutely huge. And feeding those deer year round, these guys that don't want to have a summer food source for creating a doe factory, that just don't make any sense at all to me. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't attract a lot of does, but I want my deer to have the best nutrition possible 365 days a year.
No doubt. Well, let's do one thing, and you don't even know this. I may have mentioned it in passing in the office today before I left, but this is brand new, and it's a resource for all of our listeners that have access to the internet. So I'm going to share my screen. If you're watching YouTube right now, you're going to see Mike's Mighty Micro's new website, and they put a ton of work into this new website. So mikesmightymicros.com. And I want to show just a couple quick things for folks who are looking to do the same type of thing as what Don just talked about with soil health. And if you can watch on YouTube, if not listen, you can go look at it. He has 2 very clear application formats. One is for food plots and one is for gardens. So all of your wives that are raising roses or vegetable gardens, you can actually go into this and look at product specific application rates for all of your vegetables in your garden. So you know how much biochar to put down. You know how much Mike's Mighty Micros to put down and when. But in the food plot section, this is where it's really going to be, hey, I know that guy right there. But this is where there's a picture of Don on the screen. There is an application chart where we can go in and figure out what we're using for product finder and dosage calculator. So the dosage calculator is how much Mike's Mighty Micros do I want to put down. So you can select your sprayer size by gallon. And then you can say, like, for instance, I have a 50-gallon sprayer and I want to spray my clovers, alfalfas, brassicas, oats, and peas, or I want to do soybeans. You can go in and then put in your acreage that you want. I'm going to have 5 acres in one food plot. This will give you your mix concentration. So a lot of people don't understand you don't need a ton of Mike's Mighty Micros and you end up using too much. But what I really like about it is it tells you when to spray it. This is really important for your fruit trees with your bloom timing. All of this guideline for different product-specific plants and what type of sprayer you have. It's a phenomenal resource that Mike and his family just put a ton of research in. I think it looks really great.
That's a good looking website for sure.
When you're looking at biochar, you can choose whether you're doing garden beds, new transplants, planting shrubs and trees, food plots, row crops, pastures, orchards, adding it to feed additive for livestock. You can go through and it selects all of this stuff and gives you an estimated cost and application rate. So huge tool that our friends at Mike's Mighty Micros have spent a lot of time and money. Go check that out, mikesmightymicros.com. All right, you ready to move on to our listener submitted questions?
I'm ready.
All right, we'll listen to a spot from Midwest Land Group and we'll be right back.
Ever had a terrible real estate experience? Average realtors usually spend more time selling themselves than on selling your land. They'll tell you anything to get the listing. They know that if they get the listing, you're stuck with them. Not here. Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. That means if we don't meet your expectations, you can fire us. That puts all the pressure on us to perform. We don't just list land, we sell it. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us. Visit us at MidwestLandGroup.com.
All right, our first question comes from Daniel Byler from Canajoharie, New York. It says, hi, Don and Terry. As you guys probably know, back in the good old days, trapping was a big thing. Don, since you were a trapper back in your younger years, I would like to hear your thoughts on why trapping has become a lost art, and also what you have learned from it. I hear there has been a steady attack on the sport of trapping by animal rights groups and many people wanting to ban trapping altogether. Thank you both for what you do for the hunting community. Well, I think the big reason that trapping is it hasn't totally died, but it's not near as popular as it once was because the fur market is not what it once was. You know, when I was in high school 40 some years ago, gasoline was 90 some cents a gallon, and a large raccoon brought $40. I sold lots of raccoons for $30 and big ones for 40. And you think about that in today's market, you know, well, diesel fuel right now is $5 a gallon. If you could buy 40 gallons with one raccoon, you know, you're looking at $200 for a coon. I guarantee you, if coons were $200, trapping would be a pretty popular sport today. But the animal rights freaks, liberal as they are, they basically destroyed the fur market for the most part. Today, a raccoon, I don't know, you'd be probably lucky to get $5 for a raccoon. But that's what happened to the sport more than anything. I got the utmost respect for trappers because trapping requires dedication. It's not like you go out on the weekend and you set the traps and come back next weekend. I mean, it's a daily grind. You got to be out there every single day checking those traps. And there's just not many outdoorsmen that are willing to put in the effort to do that, especially with the low fur prices. As far as what you learn, I had a conversation this week with Al Foster about trapping, and this topic came up. And I said to Al, I said, when you can get a coyote to put his foot on a spot this big, then you've accomplished something. It's way harder, in my opinion, it's harder to trap coyotes than it is to shoot big deer. They are every bit as smart as a mature buck. There's a lot more of them, and that's why so many of them get killed. But if you talk about just trapping, yeah, once you get it down, once a trapper becomes proficient and learns the art, then he can rack up some, pretty impressive numbers of coyotes because there's so many out there. But the average trapper is not going to rack up a big number of coyotes. The thing of it is with trapping is you learn to read sign. You learn to read terrain features. Where are these animals going to come across the countryside? Where are they going to be pinched down their travel routes and such? And where can you take advantage of such things? And it's very similar when you're hunting big deer. So where is that travel pattern or route going to be pinched down, and how are you going to take advantage of it? And the other thing is, especially with the canines, the coyotes and foxes, is you learn how much they use their nose. You put your scent on a fence post or something, your trapping scent, so it gets up in the breeze and carries for a long ways. And then you have more scent there around your trap, whatever, if you're making a dirt hole set or whatever. But you learn to play dominant winds or predominant winds to get those animals into your set. I mean, you gotta get that animal to put his foot on a spot that's about an inch and a half in diameter.
Right.
So it's a challenge, and again, my hat's off to the guys that are still doing it. I'm going to do some this winter with my grandson Walker, but it's a lost art for sure.
And I think the other part of it, what's always kept me out of, is I don't have time. You have to check that trap every day, and I'm not home every day. I mean, it's just, there's not a period of time where my schedule allows me to. I'd love the experience of doing it with somebody just to get the experience and learn, but for me to do it myself on my property, it's just not an option. Okay, here comes the next question. You can read it off for everybody.
This one comes from Rich Eddington from Alpharetta, Georgia. Says, hi, Don and Terry. Love the podcast. I've hunted a long time, but you guys have opened my eyes to many details I overlooked, especially around land management and intrusion. Don, you often talk about how isolation helps your property and how blessed you are to have ag fields surrounding most of your land. What do you believe would be the impact if someone with stupid money, maybe Pritzker, bought ag land adjoining your property and used some of your practices to turn it into a good deer hunting property? Keep up the good work, and God bless. Well, Rich, the Illinois property that I described as one of my favorites from this consulting season was basically that 62 acres, I think it was. It is almost 100% tillable ground. So, I get what it means to take a piece of a blank canvas and turn it into deer habitat. And I've been asked many times, do you think you could take a 40 or 80 acre chunk of ag ground and turn it into a big buck factory? And I think absolutely I could. What would happen if someone with ridiculous money did that next to my farm? Well, to be honest, I think that I don't know if there's very many people that are going to take things to the extreme that I do. I'm talking about the management of the bucks as much as anything. How many guys are going to let 180 or 90-inch bucks walk? And I think what would happen is the same thing that happens across most of the whitetails range, is high grading would take place. I firmly believe that the thing that I've done on my farm that's had the biggest impact is how I manage the bucks that live here. And if someone had a property right next to me where they was managing the same bucks that I am, they would be doing things counterproductive to what I'm doing. So the bucks that I'd be letting go, hoping that they made it to 5-6 years old, would be probably getting shot on these other farms as 4-year-olds, and maybe as 3-year-olds, depending on how good they are. And that would be my guess of what would happen.
Gotcha. All right. We'll put the next one up here for you.
All right, this one comes from David Matthews from Kansas City, Missouri. He says, Don, I'm a 35-year-old whitetail fanatic. I live and breathe whitetails 365 days a year. I follow all of your stuff and know that you are one of the top whitetail consultants in business today. I also know that you have a team of other consultants working under you. Do you have any plans to add more consultants to your team, and how would a young guy like myself be considered for such a position? Thank you. Well, David, I'm telling you, I get that question probably a minimum of twice a week. Uh, just in recent days, I've had at least two that I can think of right off the top of my head, people reach out about that. To be honest, this stage in my career, at 62 years old, be 63 this summer, I'm not sure what the roadmap looks like for me moving forward as a consultant. The other thing is I tell all these young guys, why would somebody hire you? I ask them that question. Why would somebody hire you? With all the new consultants out there in business today, why would somebody pick you out of all the others? You got to build your resume. And, there's a saying that an old Amish guy from Pennsylvania shared with me a few years back. And the saying is, knowledge without mileage is worthless. Now think about that. Knowledge without mileage is worthless. And basically that saying is, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but until you have experience to back it up, it's worthless. Gene Wenzel used to say you could read all the books you want on riding a bicycle, but until you get on and start pedaling, you're not going to know how to ride a bicycle. I think he said the same thing about being a bodybuilder. You can read all the muscle building books you want, but until you start pumping iron, you're not going to be a bodybuilder and you're not going to grow muscle. So I think that for all you guys, because I'm sure there's more than one person listening to this that would like to be a whitetail consultant, I tell them all the same thing. Build your resume. Give people a reason to want to hire you. Don't be in a hurry. Guys, I spent my entire life working towards making my living in the hunting industry, and I did not really do it until I was in my mid 50s. Think about that. I was in my mid 50s and I didn't have near the competition that you guys have today. I didn't have near the knowledge resources out there that are available today to learn. A lot of my learning came firsthand and talking to other people from lessons they'd learned firsthand. So you got more competition today than ever, but you got more knowledge today than ever. But that knowledge without mileage doesn't do anything to set you apart from the crowd. You can read all the books you want on creating good habitat. You can read all the books you want on hunting mature bucks. But until you go out there and slip an arrow through a few of them, it really means nothing. So build your resume. Again, I'm not looking to hire anyone else on the team at this time, but we're able to handle the workload that we have now. I got 6 guys working under me: Terry West, Derek Burkholder, Bobby Worthington, David Elliott, and Caleb Gaiman. So we got them scattered from Delaware out through Missouri. We got Bobby down in Tennessee, Terry in Kentucky, Wes in Indiana, Derek up in northern Indiana, not far from Michigan. So we got them scattered right now, and we're able to handle the workload. But I don't know what the future is going to hold, but I don't, in the near future, I'm not going to be looking to add anybody to the team.
It's so commoditized now. It's tough. People wanting to start a business and a passion, find something that's not already saturated. And I remember thinking the first 2 years of this podcast that I wasn't ready to start consulting, and I still didn't until you convinced me you need to start doing this. You're ready. I still wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for, you pulling me along and giving me the confidence that says, now you're ready after, being with you for so much. But, yeah, it's definitely, let's just say it's also got a lot more curb appeal than it really does. I mean, we really enjoy the people we get to work with, but man, you talk about exhausting, and it's not, you got a couple months of it that you can do every year, and that's pretty much it. So, I mean,
The other
it's
thing
been
is
good. It's been good to us. I can't complain at all by any means.
integrity. You've got to keep your good name. You do whatever you've got to do to, and it goes for any business really, but especially today with the internet and social media, you do somebody wrong and the word's going to get around. And one of the biggest, or two, the biggest complaints I hear about other consultants, because we've done a lot of properties that other consultants have already done before we got there, and And I'm sure there's been other consultants follow us on properties. There's some people that just have a lot of money and they want to hear everybody's opinion on their place. But the two biggest complaints that I hear is follow up after the visit. They can't get a hold of the consultant that they hired. They write him his check while he was there and he drives off and they never see him again, never talk to him again, and it frustrates them. The other thing is the written plan that they got in hand. And this, I think this one, anybody can return phone calls. I mean, that should be a no-brainer. Everybody should be doing that. Return phone calls, text, emails, whatever. Yeah, sometimes I'm slow to do it, but I do get around, and I'm not saying one never falls through the cracks, but I do. But I think the written plan really separates the really good consultants from, I guess, the average. I don't want to slam anybody and say they're not good, but that written plan really separates the top of the line consultants from the rest of the pack. Oh, we got an anonymous one here. It says, hello, Don and Terry. My question for you guys is all about timber stand improvements. A few years ago, we had the property logged, taking out several over-mature trees and much thinning to get the sunlight to the ground. The regrowth has been substantial and the deer are loving it. Now the problem. I had several mature bucks that called it home. As spring turned to summer and got closer to fall, I noticed the bucks disappearing from my trail cameras. I found all those bucks this shed season laying around the stagnant water holes created by the log skidder. This is a total reset for my buck crop. Are we creating our own worst nightmare? The property has no other water holes except for my pond, and there was no dead deer anywhere around it. What do you say about this problem? Thanks, and God bless you both. Well, I think if EHD is going to hit an area, it's going to hit. Probably controlling the water sources may help to some degree, but I don't think that you can totally stop it. I think you can decrease the effects of EHD, but I don't think you can totally stop it. Those deer were at those water sources. Wouldn't they be at another water source if those weren't there? Wouldn't they be in your pond or the neighbor's pond or whatever, creek? I just think that sometimes it's wishful thinking for us trying to come up with a solution for that. And I think the benefits that you get from logging a property and from an aggressive TSI cut far outweigh any negative that might happen from, the ruts left by the logger. And the other thing you can do is you can tell the logger that he's not allowed in under muddy conditions. He's got to do it in the winter when the ground's froze, or he's got to do it in the summer when the ground is hard and it's not, soft and muddy. So there's plenty of options, but the positives far outweigh the negatives.
Okay. Last question.
All right, this one comes from Justin Shear from Janesville, Wisconsin. It says, how smart do you think deer really are? In most cases, this may be overthinking, but in a couple of instances, hunting late season when pressure was at some point at its highest not too long ago, I have witnessed a main group of deer bedding with what you may call some lookouts for danger, meaning the lookouts were bedded 60 or so yards away from the main group of deer, but bedded near our access trails where hunters walked religiously. Maybe you can elaborate, since it is basically common knowledge these days that mature bucks are practically a different species. Do they realize that we're after them for what's on their head, or is it just old age and their progression with dealing with danger their whole lives? Maybe you have some examples that you have witnessed, maybe through hunting or raising pin deer. Thanks, and God bless. Well, Justin, I think that deer adapt to their environment and the dangers within their environment a lot faster than we realize. Yeah, I can think of two examples real quick off the top of my head. And one property is a permission property that I've hunted for years. I'd park my truck out on the road at a certain location, and there was kind of I would walk across an open field to the woods, and there was kind of a rise in that open field. So the deer that were in the woods couldn't see my truck parked out there. But once they would feed out into that field, they're still hundreds of yards away from my truck parked there, and they would see it. They would just go berserk because they knew that truck parked there meant that somebody was in their woods where they weren't supposed to be. And they would just go berserk and start blowing and stomping and running back the direction that they came. Another situation years ago, and I got this one on video. I had parked my four-wheeler a couple hundred yards from the woods where I was hunting. There was an old corner post with a bunch of weeds growed up around it, and I parked behind that post in the weeds. You could still see it. It wasn't super obvious, but you could see it. And I'm in my stand there on the edge. My scent's blowing back out across that open ag field that I just walked across. And here comes this 4-year-old buck. And he walks up to a point to where he could see that four-wheeler, and he just locks up and he stares at that four-wheeler for the longest time. And he had been walking on the outside edge, the field side of the edge of the timber. And when he seen that and he stopped and looked at it he locked up for probably 2 solid minutes. And when he finally decided to move again, he flicked his tail and he came into and he was no longer out on that outer edge. And then he continued on the same way he had been going, but he was no longer exposed out on that field edge. And it was obviously a reaction to seeing my four-wheeler parked out there. I think that we probably don't give them enough credit for teaching their young about danger. And I've mentioned many times the whole deal with the red deer and the Berlin wall. And if you haven't heard it before, folks, just go on the internet, do a search for Berlin wall red deer and read all the information there about that. In a nutshell, these red deer, when the Berlin wall came down for 20 years, those deer would still not cross where that wall had been 20 years earlier. So all the deer that were alive when that wall was there had long since died, but they had passed on that perceived danger to following generations. And I think that's what happens with our sanctuary areas, is that as time goes by, one generation of deer passes it on to the next generation that this is the safest place in the neighborhood. We can stay here day after day. We can move in daylight in this sanctuary because there's no danger here. And that's why I've got to the point where I'm telling my clients when they create a new sanctuary, I encourage them not to go in there at all for the first 5 years, not even for a shed antler hunt. Go in there and get whatever habitat work needs to be done. Make it as thick as possible. If you need to cut trails to bring the deer out past your stands, get that done. But then once it's done, stay out of it for 5 years. Don't ever go in it unless you shoot a deer that goes in there. That's the only reason you go in it. And what you're doing is you're building that idea in the deer's mind that this is the safest place in the whole neighborhood. This is where I need to be spending my daylight hours. And I think to consistently kill big deer, the trick, if there is a trick, is getting them to stay on your property on a consistent basis, day after day after day, instead of going in because you got a hot stand in the middle of the property that just produced, like Terry likes to say, it produced one good buck back in 1991. So I'm going to continue to hunt it every year for the rest of my life. And you push out the property on your way in to hunt it. You get about 2 good hunts, if that. And not only did you ruin that stand, but you've really ruined the property from what it could be. And we're always trying to reach the property ceiling. Whatever the ceiling is, that's what we strive for. In different areas and different states, the ceiling is going to be different. You get into a prime property like I just talked about in Ohio or Illinois, where you're right next to a huge sanctuary. Even though it's only a 40 or 60 acre property, the ceiling is sky high there because you're going to be able to have old mature bucks in that sanctuary year after year after year. Now, sure, not all of them are going to be giants. Some of them may top out at 140, 150 inches, but you're going to have plenty of bigger ones too. I guess that's my spiel on deer and how smart they are, because I think that they do pass things on to each other. How they do it, and they obviously don't talk, but for somehow the young get the message from their mother that this place is dangerous or this place is safe, and they remember it and they pass it on to the next generation. And over time that builds and builds and builds to where the deer, I was just out feeding my cows about an hour ago, and I noticed as I'm sitting there at the water tank, letting the water tank fill, I noticed something back in the brush. So I grabbed the binos out of I thought it was a turkey, actually. I grabbed my binos and I look across the pasture into the woods, and I see it's a deer that's bedded right there, just right next to the pasture. Well, as I started looking even harder, I seen 6 deer. There were 6 total that I could see, probably more than that, but I could see 6 bedded right there. And, I'm right there. They could see me. They could see me filling that water tank. They could see me dumping feed into the feed trough. But they know that I don't represent danger there. Now, if I go stomping back in there where they were bedded, that's a whole different story. And deer can accept humans as long as humans stay where they're supposed to. I think they're a whole lot smarter than we give them credit for. I remember many years ago, a friend of mine was telling me that I give deer too much credit. I give them too much credit for being smart. Well, guess which one of us has killed the most big deer? I want to be able to kill the smartest buck in the woods, because if I can kill the smartest buck in the woods, the ones that aren't quite as smart, they come pretty easy.
I can't remember who said it, but they basically said a deer will pattern us far before we will ever pattern a deer. They know when we're there and what we're doing and what's danger, what's not.
I absolutely believe that.
All right, well, that's a wrap for this show. I got two quick housekeeping announcements. Number one, for those of you who are listening to the Chasing Assurance podcast, we have gotten so many churches that are starting to use Dad's material as small group or Sunday school class or youth group lessons that we've started a second YouTube channel called Chasing Assurance. So if you want, we're going to eventually evolve by putting it over there on that platform. So if you're interested in that content, make sure you like and subscribe to the Chasing Assurance YouTube channel. For a time being, we'll still put it on both channels, but if you're listening to Dad's content, make sure you go over there. We'll probably start putting the Sunday night prayer time, just the short devotion part of it, on there also, while it will remain at the end of this episode. And this week, Wes Delks, the Prodigy, has the Sunday night prayer time this week.
Anxious to hear what Wes has to say.
All right, that's a wrap.
God bless everybody. See you here next week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
The Shroud of Turin. There is a linen shroud made from flax in Italy that has been dated using several different methods and is over 2,000 years old. And there's hundreds of different burial cloths from the land of Israel, but there's one that has an image on the burial cloth. And that image is in a picture over my shoulder. And that image is of a crucified man. And scientists, criminologists, lots of people that have no theological axe to grind have studied this burial cloth, and there is no pigment, there is no paint, there are no brush strokes. There is nothing in the burial cloth that can explain how the image is on this burial cloth. As a matter of fact, a rich man offered a fortune to anyone that could replicate this Shroud of Turin, and no one can. The Shroud of Turin is so important, as to me, I believe that as a Christian, our top 3 witnessing tools are first and foremost the written Word of God, the Bible. Second is the word of our testimony, our faith. How has God impacted us? And to me, number 3 is the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin proves the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. I am not an expert in the Shroud of Turin, but there's many that are. And I encourage you to look up Dr. Jeremiah Johnston on YouTube or on a podcast platform and listen to him speak with Tucker Carlson, or he was recently with a Lakewood church, I believe, and listen to Dr. Jeremiah Johnston talk about the Shroud of Turin. It's absolutely incredible. There's over 38 different pollen spores, different species of pollen found in the Shroud of Turin, and many are specific to Jerusalem in springtime. There's just fact after fact of how the Shroud of Turin is legitimate. Is that there's a Italian mathematician, Bruno Barbaris, who has studied the shroud, and he says that there is a 1 in 200 billion chance that the shroud is not from Jesus Christ. So I like those odds, 1 in 200 billion chance. So this burial cloth that is in Italy is 2,000 years old, and there's an image on this burial cloth, and it shows all of his wounds. There are over 700 different wounds on the crucified man, and all these wounds relate directly to Scripture. If you read through the Gospels, and there's 21 other different historical documents that talk about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and where his injuries were and such. And the Shroud of Turin aligns with this specifically to a T, every single detail, from the spear that went between his ribs. I believe it was like between his 5th and 6th ribs, the nail scarred hands, the nails that went between in his wrist, the nails in his feet, the crown of thorns. It's absolutely incredible. You have to listen to the Shroud of Turin podcast from Jeremiah Johnston. You will be inspired. And this Easter weekend, I was praising God for a risen Savior. I am so thankful that we serve a God who is alive. And I think of in the book of Daniel, it says that in the time of the end, knowledge will increase as people run to and fro, and secrets once sealed will be made known. And it's pretty incredible on the technology that we have, on all the ways that the Shroud of Turin can be studied now that weren't available for centuries. And we can prove its authenticity and prove what the Shroud of Turin is. And there is no other explanation for this burial cloth other than the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Heavenly Father, thank you for a risen Savior. Thank you that we have the Shroud of Turin, that is an awesome witnessing tool, a testimony that we can use to encourage fellow Christians and to show other people that you were brutally killed through the crucifixion, but that you died and then rose again. And I believe that image shows the resurrection. Thank you for that tool that we have to share Jesus with other people. Have a great week. God bless.